Hi, I want to share something that I've been trying out lately that is kind of making my life quite a bit easier with regards to being neurodivergent. And this is specifically speaking to the aspect of either putting off tasks for ridiculous amounts of time, not being able to start them because they're just so big, and you realize that you probably won't be able to finish them in the way that you think they need to be finished, in the way that your inner voice requires them to be finished, because you currently don't have the energy or time or mental capacity for that amount of work, which we often just peg down as, oh, generally I'm very overwhelmed by this impending task, so I just, spiral into overwhelm and can't do it. Or you do get hyped up to do that task. You get like a hyper focus or a fixation on it, and you start doing it, and then everything else just falls apart. And by that I mean you probably don't eat properly, you probably don't take breaks, you probably just put all your energy and focus into that task for hours on end, even though it doesn't even need to take hours. It never takes, quote unquote, normal people hours to do this task. And although you do it in a beautiful and fantastic and super good way, you kind of do that at the expense of your well-being. And also you do understand that it doesn't need that kind of perfectionism from you most of the time. So this aspect I will be discussing now, and to make it more obvious where the autistic perfectionism goes wrong, the example I'm going to be taking and what I've actually been testing it against mostly for myself is the example of household chores. So again, my example from my life is that so I've recently moved house and I need to set it up the way that I need it. And it has to be exactly the way that I need it, or I can't function. You'll probably relate. And without help and certain mechanisms in place, this does take weeks, sometimes months, and is a big hindrance to life in general, for neurodivergence at least. However, here's the primary trick that I've been testing. So what I'm doing is I'm starting out with some mental exercises. Every time that I have a specific task in mind, once I'm not too overwhelmed to think of a specific task, that is. So once I know there's this specific task and I know that it's huge and I'm not going to get around it, and then also I need to get around to it and it's eating at me and adding to my overwhelm, well, I sit down with myself and I take a few minutes. And this is a cleaning task, so the example is about cleaning, but the principle applies to all sorts of tasks. So I think about this task and I recall seeing, the thing here is, if I just recall quote-unquote normal people doing that task in like 10 minutes and getting on with it, that doesn't help, because I know that the result that they get is probably just not the result that I'd be satisfied with, because quick jobs don't usually give you a perfectly good result, and in a stressful situation the neurodivergence does demand things to be just right. And it's an issue of personal comfort, that this isn't the time to just try and, move the boundaries of your personal comfort, because it's a stressful situation, it's a stressful time, and the opposite strategy is actually optimal. The opposite strategy being doing everything that would actually maximize the personal comfort, even when the neurodivergence demands some things which are somewhat unreasonable in the grand scheme of things. So what actually helps me is recalling situations where I would probably here on YouTube I'd see some cleaning videos of spaces which are just in a really, really bad state. And then professional cleaners would get them into their ideal state. And the thing is that when they do that, they actually don't do it in 10 minutes, obviously. If a place is in pretty bad shape, that doesn't happen in 10 minutes. However, each kind of they do it in several stages of doing the same thing. Say washing the floors. They would wash the floors one time, they would wash the floors a second time, they can even do it 10 or 20 times if the situation is really bad, until they get the good result. And they don't do those 20 washes on the same day. So this specific example really helped me to think about my household tasks in this way. So I was able to envision that whatever I wanted to get done could be done in several increments of the same action that don't have to tire me out by being done on the same day, and also I don't have to do one big action where I get it all done immediately in one kind of huge process and just get something, sparkling clean, but it takes me hours and hours. So this is a bit of a different approach, like learning a new process, like doing something several times over, but the initial action is simpler because you're not aiming at perfection, you're just aiming at, for example, sweeping, right? And it would be overwhelming to think about sweeping 40 times over, but it would also be overwhelming to think about sweeping once, but just so well that it doesn't even have to be done again for ages, as we neurodivergents like to do things a lot of the time. So just the idea is that you switch your goals and switch your understanding of the way that you would do something without compromising on the end result that your neurodivergence demands and your comfort level demands, whatever is happening. And as I've tried this out, I have, of course, on many occasions relapsed into the hyper-focus, overextend myself, and then tire myself out too much way of doing things. But this new idea also has worked, So I would do something just fairly quickly and then be able to switch to other things, because I know that that was one task out of a list of, let's say, 10 tasks. So I would think that I'd probably need a few times redoing this, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, don't know exactly how many times, but I do it one time, and that's like something I tick off my mental load, because I tell myself that I will only do the second time, third time, fourth time when I feel up to it, which isn't right now. And so I've been able to do that, but the most important thing you're probably thinking about is, yes, but won't that particular space that you started working on and didn't finish be bugging you, just like it was before you even did anything? And the really interesting thing is that, yes, it continues to be like a thing in your mind where, well, that's not perfect, that's not how I need it. However, the whole entire load of it not being perfect, I found actually lessens by that 1/5, 1/10, 1/50th, whatever. And my entire whole overwhelmed potential also lessens by that amount. And because of this, I think this strategy is pretty amazing, since it's not a way of getting unstuck enough to get a big thing done right now and have it completely off your plate, but it is a way of actually lessening your whole mental overwhelm, load and potential by an amount that does make a difference, is palpable, in a very short amount of time and with quite little effort. It does, however, require, so the most important thing to even achieve this is that when you have your task in mind, you do need to do this short but very important mental exercise where you find a way to make this task part of a series of tasks that are probably done a bit differently than you normally would do them, and then you become internally okay with having each part a complete process, but part of a larger process. And then you can internally be okay with doing just one or a few parts of this process and not the entire thing, with each part being complete enough for a specific time, like right now. And you become mentally okay with, like in the example, not having the entire house clean right now and not having this particular part of the house scrubbed to perfection right now, but having, say, a corner swept up right now, and then just having that alone be a satisfying experience. And I'm making this recording because, yes, actually, to the neurodivergent brain, it is pretty difficult to having an incomplete task being a satisfying experience. This really can sometimes even lead to meltdowns. So I've tried to explain as best I could that the way around this, one way around this, is to mentally categorize these smaller tasks to be perceived as complete experiences, which are part of a whole. For example, although this next example sometimes is also problematic for the neurodivergent brain, but for example, if you wanted to write a book, you would probably expect, if you were very optimistic, that you'd be writing, say, a chapter a day or a chapter a week, and then you'll be done within a few days or a few weeks, but you wouldn't be writing the book in one day. Sometimes the neurodivergent brain does start to tell you that it's all or nothing. You have to do even such a huge task just on this day or not at all. It's always right now or never, So that's a bit of a trap. That is exactly what I'm talking about. However, we can kind of, envision that you'd be writing a chapter a day and not a whole book all in one go. And I'm not going to go into the fact that if a neurodivergent was writing a book, they would, start off strong and do a couple of chapters in one day and then get very tired and very distracted and won't be able to carry on this beautiful plan of doing a chapter a day. So that's a separate issue. But the concept itself that I think we find it easy enough to understand that some big things take a few increments. So the main pitfall here would be to then end up setting yourself up for a bit of a failure with this strategy by telling yourself, I have to do the sweeping today, I have to do the sweeping tomorrow, I have to do the sweeping the next day, and you plan 2 weeks of sweeping. And then on the next day is just not a sweeping day, right? This is something you have to keep out of this strategy. So once you're setting up your mental to-do list to do this particular task, such as sweeping or whatever, in increments, you're also simultaneously allowing yourself to do as many or as few increments or none at all on any given day where you feel up to it. That's quite important. And sweeping is a lot more low stakes than writing a book, so it's a good place to practice, because then when you come to bigger tasks that have consequences and you try to employ these same strategies, that sort of gets a little bit more difficult because of the stakes, right? And you need further strategies to get around that. So if you try this out, please remember to try it out in game form and to allow yourself to just do as little or as much as you feel like. Okay? Let me know if you tried, and thank you for listening.